Today we're diving into the final, tragic moments of Germanwings Flight 9525. It's a story that starts out completely normal, just a routine flight, but ends in an absolute nightmare. And what's so terrifying is how it reveals that the very safety measures designed to protect a plane from the outside could also trap it with a threat from within. So let me start by asking you a pretty horrifying question. Imagine you are the captain of a passenger jet. You pop out of the cockpit for just a moment, but when you try to get back in, the door is locked. And through that little window, you realize to your absolute horror, the plane is diving. What do you even do then? Well, for the captain of Flight 9525, this wasn't some scary what-if scenario. This was his desperate, terrifying reality. He was locked out, frantically trying to smash his way back into his own cockpit as his plane was just plummeting towards the French Alps. 10 minutes. That's how long this horrifying descent lasted. In our everyday lives, 10 minutes is nothing. It's the time it takes to make a coffee. But on that plane, can you imagine? It must have felt like an absolute eternity of pure terror as the ground just rushed up to meet them. But the unbelievable thing is, this day didn't start with any chaos at all. In fact, it was the exact opposite. It began as just another totally normal, totally boring flight, one of thousands that happen across Europe every single day. Okay, so let's get the facts straight. The date was March 24th, 2015. The flight was Germanwings 9525, and it was on a super standard route, flying from sunny Barcelona, Spain, up to Dusseldorf, Germany. The first half hour was completely by the book. Takeoff was right on time at 10:01 a.m. By about 10:27, the plane hit its cruising altitude of 38,000 feet. And it's right at that moment that the captain, Patrick Sondenheimer, does something he's probably done 1,000 times before. He leaves the cockpit to use the washroom. And with that one simple, routine act, the captain unknowingly handed sole control of the aircraft over to his 27-year-old co-pilot, Andreas Lubitz. And in that one moment, absolutely everything changed. What happened next was just chillingly methodical. First, the co-pilot locks the cockpit door from the inside, which completely disables the keypad entry from the outside. Then, he changes the autopilot's altitude setting from 38,000 feet all the way down to just 100 feet. And with that single input, the fatal descent began. This started that final 10-minute countdown. And on either side of that reinforced cockpit door, you had two drastically different scenes playing out. It's like two different worlds. Outside, it was pure, absolute chaos. The cockpit voice recorder picked up the sounds of the captain yelling, then banging, then trying to smash the door down. In the cabin, passengers were screaming. But inside the cockpit, just a chilling, absolute silence. The co-pilot didn't say a single word. He just sat there, and the recorder picked up the sound of his calm, steady breathing. There were 150 people on that plane. They weren't just a number. They were students on a school trip, business travelers, families going on vacation, all these individual lives and futures. And in those last terrifying minutes, the fate of every single one of them rested in the hands of the one person who was locked inside that cockpit. This quote, which comes from the investigation's findings, just captures the haunting reality of it all. His inaction was the devastating action. That deafening silence from behind the locked door was probably the most terrifying sound of all. In the aftermath, as the entire world was just reeling from the shock, the investigation began. The black boxes were recovered and the horrifying truth started to come out, all centered around answering that one massive question: why? French prosecutors pretty quickly came to a staggering conclusion. The crash of Germanwings 9525 was no accident. It was a deliberate act. The co-pilot had intentionally destroyed the aircraft. And as investigators dug into his life, they uncovered this hidden story of personal turmoil. The co-pilot, Andreas Lubitz, was suffering from severe depression and was seeing multiple doctors for it. On top of that, his girlfriend was reportedly pregnant, and he was absolutely terrified that his medical issues would make him lose his pilot's license, the one job he loved. So he concealed everything from his employer. Now, this tragedy did lead to immediate changes, like the rule of two, which requires 2 crew members to be in the cockpit at all times. But it leaves us with this much bigger and honestly much more unsettling question. It's one thing to fortify a cockpit against threats trying to get in from the outside, but how does an entire industry protect itself and its passengers from the invisible threats that are already